So I've got three main findings I will talk about. The first one was that borders alter but do not prevent migrants' trajectories, in that that people who initially considered going to the UK, for example, they had to reassess their migratory journeys, and in the end they claimed asylum in either France or Luxembourg because of the border control in France, which prevented them from reaching the UK. Social encounters had an important impact on their onward journeys as such, because quite a few people interviewed, they decided to go to a different country as opposed to the one they initially considered because of the people they met during their trajectories, and as such they went together as a group basically to the destination country. The fact that borders alter but do not prevent migrants' trajectories, I think it's also important in terms of country typologies when we talk about transit countries or countries of destination, because I think we no longer can talk about these traditional typologies, because countries can be both transit countries and countries of destination at the same time. A second finding was that the Schengen area does facilitate movement, in the sense that we found that in the greater region, which includes parts of Belgium, Germany, France, and also the Grand Duchy of Luxembourg, mobility was commonplace for the asylum seekers and the refugees interviewed, although asylum seekers are not allowed to engage in cross-border mobility because they don't have the refugee status. They still did, and it was somewhat tolerated because there are no borders as such. Also, it facilitates the secondary movements of asylum seekers or refugees who considered leaving the host countries for various reasons, such as employment or family reasons. So in a way, mobility was for them an insurance policy, enabling them to address the dissatisfaction they had when it came to low employment outcomes in the host country. A final finding, which probably encapsulates more or less the project, is that migrants' mobility journeys became administrative journeys once in the host countries, translated into their access to housing or employment, but also basically in their administrative process surrounding the asylum process. We can't take refugees' permanency in the host countries for granted. Many refugees hope to apply for naturalization to get the host country citizenship, in the hope that maybe they would either be able to engage in onward to visit their families who are out of the European Union, or to find employment in a different country in case they weren't able to access the employment market, the labor market in the local in the host countries. So this shows also that naturalization is not necessarily the first step of integration, or is not indicative of integration necessarily, but is the first stage of a journey. At the moment, the Dublin regulation stipulates that one of the criteria which should be taken into account when determining the first country of application is to take into account also the family criteria. However, the family criteria is not used as often as the first country of arrival. This also has emerged quite a lot in our interviews, because many of the participants who want to engage in secondary movements do so for family reasons. So I think that one of the main recommendations we would have for policy makers would be that the family criteria should be taken into account more so than it is at the moment. Basically, for the country in charge with processing their application should be the country in which they actually have some family ties or family networks, and this would encourage them to stay in that country rather than engage in onward movement.